And then the second mandate, the specific submissions. The committee shall consider the submission made to it in accordance with paragraph 9. This is the trigger options, with a view to determining the facts and root causes of the matter of concern and assist in its resolution. Key here is, of course, determining facts and root causes. That's the big difference, and you'll hear more about it between dispute settlement and compliance, is that here the whole idea is to restore compliance. To restore compliance, you have to understand why there's no compliance, understanding the difficulties, and then assist in its resolution, so helping the parties get back to compliance. So it's a tailor-made approach to the parties' difficulty. So there are 3 triggers. That's classical, but every time it's negotiated, it's painful for parties to agree on the 3rd trigger. The first one is the party self-trigger. Basic, usually there's no resistance with that. The party-to-party trigger sometimes is a bit uncomfortable for some parties. In Basel, so basically a submission is made to the committee sees if it can go forward. I mean, that the formal criteria are complied with. Normally there's no problem there. And then it will consider, look at the facts, try to identify the causes of difficulties to implement the convention or to comply. It will hear the party. The party, of course, is invited to the meeting. And it's really a dialogue, I would say. A dialogue constrained by what the committee can do as per the terms of reference. But it's based on communication with the party and trying to get a result that makes sense for the party and for the convention within the confines of the terms of reference. So the committee can, at the end, decide on some measures which are non-legally binding, they're very facilitative, and if there's still no progress or the committee feels it cannot resolve, it cannot assist in resolving the matter, it can go to the COP. And what the COP can do, so what the committee can do is, really facilitative, advice. But usually, I mean, a party, if it cannot comply, most likely advice will not really help. The problems are, more deeply rooted, in the country. So this is all fine, to facilitate assistance is also a bit difficult. What has been the most promising is the voluntary compliance action plan. And this has been used quite a bit and successfully. But depending on the problem, the committee has limitations in what it can do, with the exceptions of the voluntary compliance action plan, especially if it's combined with access to funding through the implementation fund. That's the key to this day in getting success. And if this doesn't work, then the committee can recommend additional measures to the COP. And the worst is that, because it's felt punitive, the worst it can do is this. The COP could issue a cautionary statement. This wording was very carefully negotiated, as you can imagine. You'll have next week Anne Daniel coming to speak to you, and she's the author of this terminology, cautionary statement. She brokeraged the deal. Caution was felt too strong, and cautionary statement was apparently okay. It has never happened in the past, but the committee twice has adopted decisions saying that if there was no progress, it would consider at its next meeting to recommend a cautionary statement to the COP. So it went as far as saying, be careful party, we're trying our best, but you have to try with us. And if you do not try with us, we might decide to make this recommendation to the COP. And in both instances, it helped. So the party, this and having a high-level segment at the COP can really help. This is nowhere there. But if you have a COP with a high-level segment and the minister is coming and you have a party that is the object of a submission to the committee, the party might think, I better do something about it, because if my minister is there and it comes out in the discussions, that's really embarrassing. But that's not there, but it works. It's just practice. So we know if we continue to have high-level segments every 4 years, we'll have a few submissions that will be resolved before the COPs. It's just the way it is. This is information about the governance of the implementation fund. It's sometimes important for those who are worried that this is a new fund, which is not the case, and that it's without any governance structure. Yes, there is a governance structure. It's the same as the voluntary fund. And basically it's a combination of the COP of deciding that the budget would be about that much. So the COP can actually decide how much money normally should go in the implementation fund. So it puts a cap. If the COP thinks this is not the right way to proceed, it will say budget 50,000 for the biennium. That means we are not entitled to fundraise above that. So it's a very strong political signal that the COP can give us that they don't want compliance issues to be resolved through this mechanism. And then, there's a very strong COP control as to how active the fund can be. And then it's the donors who decide if they will or not give funding earmarked for the implementation fund. If no donor comes up, then there's no funding. Then there's no possibility to assist the party with funding. It will have to be through another means. Anyways, since its establishment, these are the parties that have supported the fund, the implementation fund, Colombia, Japan, Norway, and Switzerland. We're still fundraising for $100,000 because there's still some compliance action plans out there that we cannot make progress on because we're lacking funding at this time. And the implementation fund is being reviewed at this time, especially in light of the UNEP special program on institutional strengthening that was established at UNIA 1. I don't know if you heard about it, but it's there to assist parties to implement BRS, but also Minamata and SAICOM, with a focus on institutional strengthening. So there is some kind of a linkage in terms of the activities that the countries would engage in to implement or ultimately comply with the obligations of the BRS. And so the linkage between these two tracks is at this day a bit vague, I would say. There is no formal mechanism, at least now. There are two independent mechanisms, and one reports back to UNIA, the other one to the COP, and there is no, beside the participation of Secretariat or a bureau member can assist as an observer at the meeting of the executive board. It's very light in terms of how they communicate, how they work together at this time, but maybe this will improve with time. At least I would hope so. Okay, so far we had 3 sub-submissions, 3 brave parties who understood that actually the committee was there to help them. That many parties associate committee compliance with being shamed, not doing well. These 3 figured, let's be practical. I'm having difficulties, I need help, let me go and ask for the help there. And so starting with Oman, followed by Togo, and then Central African Republic, and Central African Republic, the matter has been resolved. And then 13 Secretariat submissions. The reason why we came forward with submissions, it was simple, is that from 2002 to 2008, they had been no use of this track because there was no party submission. It started just after, and no party-to-party trigger. And then the question was, what's the point of having this mechanism there if and meetings of the committee, if in any case nothing's happening? So we discussed a lot and consulted with the committee also to understand how the Secretariat could actually help in making sure that this subsidiary body actually can fulfill its functions. And since the COP had given the Secretariat this possibility to trigger, we tried to find a way to use it in a meaningful way. And within the confines of our trigger, which is at the time very limited to difficulties with national reporting. The Secretariat trigger, I guess you heard, is usually confined to instances where it is in a receiving end. It receives information from the party, and based on that, it may initiate, make a submission. It's not completely out of the blue. And so it's very linked to our position as Secretariat in receiving information from parties. Information that the parties have to submit to us. They have an obligation to do so. So if you follow the logic, if a party has the obligation to submit information and it doesn't, it's almost a self-trigger. Because the party it knows what it's doing. It's not submitting information, so we're just taking it and passing it along to the committee. There's no room for deciding, shall I do it or not, shall I pick this? The fact is there's no submission information. Where there's room for judgment and where parties might feel uncomfortable is that if we did just do this, there would be more than 100 submissions to the committee at this time, because so many parties are not fulfilling their reporting obligation. So where we have a judgment, and that's where we consult with the committees how to proceed, is that how do we limit the number? Because we cannot just give everything to committee. It's just, there's no capacity for the committee to manage that. So that's where the discussions took place. And when we had the first triggers coming up, what did we do? We looked at, okay, we could make 100 submissions. What do? We try to limit. We think about the objective of the convention, which is to facilitate, to help. And we thought, well, take the worst cases, because those apparently are the parties that are most in need. So we took the parties that had never reported. Of course, it was, I think, a good approach, because we really emphasized that the committee is there to help those most in need. But at the same time, the committee took on submissions with the most difficult parties. So the most difficult submissions matters to be resolved. Not just like this, that you can resolve a compliance matter, right? When you have, look at the countries, Central African Republic, it came forward. But we had Bhutan, Cabo Verde, Eritrea, Guinea-Bissau, Libya, Liberia, Swaziland. And these were all countries. These are all countries that really face. I mean, it's not just about implementing Basel. Right? It's just difficulties across the. Yeah.
Can you give an example? For instance, Palau, which is resolved. What was it all about?
Yeah.
500 islands. Something.
Yeah. So in these, most of them are about national reporting, but there were a few about lack of designation of country contact. Turkmenistan, Palau, and Somalia, they had not designated focal point and or competent authority, which are the designated country contacts to operate the convention.